I'm your host, Stevie Dahl, and I'm very excited about the guest I have for you today. Not only is he a veteran himself, he's also a friend of mine, and I am happy to have him join me. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce to you Mr. Levy Shultz. How are you, sir?
I am doing wonderful. I am very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Levi, if you would for a moment, just kind of give a little brief bio of who you are and what you've done.
Okay, so I am from Las Vegas, originally born in Los Angeles, but raised here. I joined the U.S. Navy. I was in the Navy for 8 years.
Love it. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. And I did 3 tours to the Gulf on aircraft carriers, one around South America. That was very fun. And then I left service to do some defense-adjacent work, and I later on ended up running for Congress.
Very
So
cool.
I just finished the primary for that, actually.
Wow, very cool. I love it, love it, love it. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to bring you in here is because I know that your transition from the military life to the civilian life was just a few years ago. And I think that that insight and perspective is important to see. And so we wanted to do it from the veteran's perspective on today's episode and have you come in. So we're going to kind of go back a little bit. And you know you've got a little space in my heart because you're a Navy man. Come on now. Daughter of a Navy man loves her Navy men. So tell me what made you decide to join the military, to serve your country, and what drew you to that?
So what drew me to it was I was somewhat of a, I won't say at-risk teenager. I had come up in Vegas through poverty. My mom was a single mom, and I later went to live with my dad in California in my teenage years. I was about 15. And when I got there, it was kind of that crossroad of you can go one way or you can go the other way. Okay. And I was sitting in the counseling office, and a commander came up to me from the Navy. He was the JROTC instructor, and he came up to me and said, I'm happy you're here, and you're here for a reason. And it was because of my background, because of the poverty and the situations that my mom and I survived domestic violence. It was something that I hadn't heard in a long time, and I felt valued. So I went in the counseling office. I said, I want to join whatever class he's teaching. They said, oh, that's JROTC. So he became a mentor of mine, and he was a commander. He was the first African-American man that I saw in a position like that. He was a fighter pilot.
Oh, wow.
So it really inspired me when I came back to Las Vegas to graduate high school in my senior year. The Navy was my immediate choice because I had said I wanted to be commissioned just like Commander Jones.
That is so awesome. It's amazing what mentorship can do for people. And I don't think, we've talked about, mental health, et cetera, topics that I love to bring up and everything to talk about. Mentorship was huge. My father, in his beginning service in the Navy, ended up having a guy take him under his wing and mentor him and guide him in a way. And then he would continue to give that to others. And I see you doing that constantly in the world we're in, so I love to see that with it. When you were serving, tell me a little bit about your time. What was like your favorite part of your service?
So my favorite part of service was the camaraderie. It pushed me. It taught me how to be a man. It taught me how to have character and integrity, and how to lead people. I think those were the biggest things. The value that I got from the Navy is so tremendous. I don't think that I would be the person that I am today or have the grit and determination that I have today without my service.
I love that so much. And you do. I love your grit, my friend. I love it. So when you decided you were going to transition out of service and go into the civilian world, what was that decision like? Was it something you had a timeline planned out that you knew, or was it just something you felt, I need to start heading in here, there's other stuff I need to do?
So it's actually a very interesting story about the integrity that was instilled in me in the Navy.
Okay.
So I planned to do the full distance to get commissioned. When I left Rialto High School with Commander Jones, he had given me his ensign bars from the Naval Academy that he first had gotten when he was commissioned. And so I said, I'm going to carry on that legacy. And I thought so long that, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to get commissioned. This is what I told him I would do. I looked him in the face. I told him. He gave me the. So I had a situation where a sailor came to me and said, I got this weird email. He was my protege. He said, I got this weird email, and it includes the top 3 in our chain of command. And I said, oh, let me take a look at this email.
Yeah.
So I looked at the email, and this sailor had been diagnosed with narcolepsy. And this was basically a pretty clear plot to cover up this sailor's illness from the leadership. So in that moment, I had to make the determination of whether I was going to be a good sailor or a good person, which I would say sometimes in the military, it's easy for you to say, oh, just get over that. That's no big deal. But I made the determination to lift this issue through the chain of command and to tackle it. And in doing so, I basically ended up taking on a fight with a commander, with the commander of the squadron. And I made the decision to leave the service. So that's what has led to me doing what I do now, which is helping veterans with any issues they may have post-service, or even active duty members, advocating for them as well.
Absolutely. You and me, we have a place in our hearts. It's there. It's there. So when you got out, did you have an idea of where you wanted to go? What kind of career you wanted to pursue?
I knew that the common thread was leadership. I wanted to lead projects and feel the same purpose I felt in the military. So when I left service, I ended up going to work for Boeing.
Okay.
So it was, and I ended up in Boeing management.
Okay.
And then I later left, interestingly, because of the beginnings of the 737 program that is now,
what it is.
infamous.
Yes, sir.
was starting at that
Yeah.
time. So I made the decision to leave because I didn't want to be a part of what was happening.
Gotcha. It's very difficult. Everybody has different reasons that we move in our careers and our life and where I go. I remember when my father transitioned out of his service, he was actually going to stay 10 more years, and he decided to transition out because he thought his daughters wanted him to. And my sister was good with it. I loved the military life. I had no problem staying in it. So, but it was quite you don't quite get the thought process that has to go into that until you speak with someone who went through it. And everybody has their own story and their own transition that they handled. So the fact that you were able to lead that into, starting a career, trying out with Boeing, getting in the management and the leadership side of it is phenomenal, because I don't think that people truly know the kind of skill that you come out of the military with sometimes, and they don't realize the benefit you can give to what you can provide to them. So what would you say are some it's like the top 3 lessons you learned in your transition from military service to the civilian world?
It was that the language of the military, because we all know, if we have proximity to military, the language and the jargon of the military has to be translated into the civilian world.
Absolutely.
That is the most pivotal piece of transitioning, is that when you look at your resume, like for me, I was an aviation electrician's mate in the military, so in the Navy. So when I lay that out, if I say, I have experience with the NAMP and NAMDRIP, and these are all terms that are germane to the military.
Right.
But if I say I have experience in process implementation and leadership and supervision and surveillance, then people say, oh, okay, that's more understandable. So I think one of the biggest lessons I learned is to translate those skills into the civilian language so that people can understand.
Oh, 100%. My dad was supply my whole life in the Navy. And when he came out of the Navy and he was looking for a job, people were like, no. And then finally somebody went, oh, logistics? Oh, you do that. It just they didn't understand warehouse with supply were the same world. They just didn't get it. So that is huge for it. And did you know there's actually a lot of translators now online provided? The DoD even has one, because I'm putting it on my company's website that we have for military families, where you type in the military phrase and it transitions it to the civilian world, so you know how to correct your resume to follow what you
Wow.
need.
That
And
is
I'm
a
like,
great tool.
that's phenomenal. That's
Yeah.
been needed for a long time. So I'm really glad that's come out.
Yes,
now.
yes,
Yeah.
definitely. It's very necessary.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. And we speak in, like, I do a lot of federal government work, and there's a lot of acronyms I speak in. My poor husband, bless his heart, he'll be like, what? I'm like, sorry. Let me come back to it.
Same here, same here.
Yeah, because you just don't realize it just rolls off the tongue.
It does.
The way it is. So, yeah. So I know you have very clear goals and aspirations. You and I have talked about a lot of stuff we focus on. We're kind of aligned because we're trying to help those military families and where they're at. And I know you're in the process of starting a new passion project, and I'm excited for you about it. Would you like to talk a little bit about it?
Sure, yes, definitely. I love this new segue from politics, because I'm a fierce fighter for veterans issues, and I believe that those who serve should be well served. So my new initiative is I've just been elected vice chair of the Democratic Veterans and Military Families Caucus. So we try to work with legislators, state legislators, and our federal endorsed candidates to get some actual work done for veterans when it comes to housing cost. My biggest issue that I ran based on my congressional race was housing, because I said those who serve here should be able to afford to live here, and we need to start moving in a direction where we have transparency around why the cost of housing is so high.
Yeah.
So that's my big initiative right now. And I'm working with a series of our endorsed candidates to make sure that they hold to their promise that they made us to look at veterans health care, look at housing, look at the privatization of our armed forces nursing homes, and really change the nature in which we treat veterans. So often is it easy for us to, I guess, provide veterans with the lip service, but not the actual results. So I love this project. I love talking to our government officials to lobby on behalf of veterans.
That's phenomenal. We'll take every step we can get. I'll tell you, like, one of the most crushing moments after we lost my dad was my mom was talking to her cell phone company, and she was letting them know Daddy had passed. And the cell phone company said, okay, well, your military discount's going to be removed. And my mother said, well, why? I still have a military ID. I'm still considered the spouse of a veteran. He's just passed. And they said, you're just the spouse. You're not the veteran. You don't count. The exact words were, you don't count. Yes, she does. Thank you. And so does every other one. That's why we need people like you fighting the way you're fighting.
Absolutely.
It's a full circle.
It really is. I mean, when I talk to a lot of state legislators, it's difficult for them to engage with veterans because they don't really, I would say they don't know the needs of veterans. And I think so often our approach is, veterans have been through a lot of, I would say, trauma, possibly in their service. So they may have a little bit of a rough edge, but I always say it's worth going out and finding out what the needs are of the community so that we can serve that community well. One of the things I was looking at recently is the ability for military qualifications to translate into the civilian world. So if you're a Fleet Marine Force corpsman who has been in Mosul, you can definitely be an emergency room technician.
Right, exactly.
It's almost laughable to think that this person who has this vast amount of experience, who could be a 20-year chief in the Navy that served Fleet Marine Force, would get out and not and have to attend, the nursing school, just like someone who's stepping out day one, and have to reset their career. This person has a wealth of knowledge and experience, and it's almost laughable to think that it doesn't translate.
Oh, 100%. It's absolutely. So now, if you don't mind, so I wanted to talk a little bit about, for you personally, you've transitioned out. I know that you have a family. You're looking to eventually expand, have some kids and stuff on your own. But your spouse did not serve.
No.
And were you guys together when you were serving, or was it after service you met?
No, it was after service.
Okay.
But my husband, his father is a military officer in Mexico.
Oh, that's awesome.
So he retired. He did 50 plus years in
wow.
the military.
Oh, wow. I love it. So he totally understands and kind of gets a perspective of what your commitment was. That's awesome.
Oh, yes. Especially, being out on the campaign trail. He was my backbone. I owe all of my wins to him.
Absolutely. Well, that's one thing I say, that it helps the service member or the veteran when the spouse is able to have their career, have their strength, that balance is there. You both can support each other equally. It's so much harder when you're worried about them dealing with stuff and trying to do your job at the same time. You want to be able to focus on what it needs. So I love that you have that and that you found that. And that's so cool that his father serves too. I love that. One of the questions I wanted to know was, from your perspective of transitioning out of the military service into the civilian world, what are your top 5 key items you think that they need to know, someone who's getting ready to enter into this transitional world?
I would say to know where you're going to live is very important, because you have to assess, roughly what the industry is like wherever you're going. Like, align your experience in the military and trade to the possible industry where you're going to live.
Okay.
For instance, if you were, I would say a combat, let's say you're in CDC, if you're an operations specialist in the Navy, maybe moving to upstate New York is not the best idea, because you're not going to find a lot of military work up there,
True.
right? Like,
Very true.
So maybe you go to Pax River, Maryland, or maybe you go to San Diego, and you can find a defense adjacent job that will transition you into your passion. Also, I would advocate looking at the housing allowance rates there, and if you are able to sustain yourself in that area.
Okay.
So I know a lot of vets have issues with that portion. So they say, I want to go to, UCLA. And you say, okay, is BAH outpaced, or is it outpaced by the cost of living in Los Angeles?
BAH.
So your basic allowance for housing.
Okay.
So when you get your post 9/11 GI Bill, if you are a full-time student, you get your housing benefits.
Okay.
So if your housing benefit is more than your, or if the cost of housing is more than your housing benefit, then you have to come up with that difference. So you have to think about, okay, what kind of time commitment is that? How much? What are the average paying salaries or jobs I can do to get by while I go to school full time? So I think that's something that I would look at, as well as just in general what the viability of your future career is and what the need for it is in the future.
Okay. Any other insight or guidance you can give to someone who's maybe just about to transition out of military service into the civilian world?
Yes, I know that it's difficult. I know it's one of the hardest decisions you'll ever make is to say, I have all my friends here. We all have served together. It's familiar. No matter what, I'll have 3 meals every day. It's very comfortable. But the decision to leave or to stay in, they're kind of difficult decisions. I'll say the military makes it easier for you to stay in, because if you're going to stay in, you just sign that reenlistment contract and you go back to work, right?
Right.
There may be a cake and you go back to work.
Right.
But if you're making the decision to get out, you'll hear, well, a lot of folks who are still in, they'll say, well, when you get out, it'll be easy. You'll make $100,000. It'll be wonderful. But it's not automatic.
Right.
It's not as automatic as you may think. And you have to really think it out, come up with a plan. And I would say anyone who's considering it, start looking at it 6 months out. When you're 6 months out from your end of obligated service, start looking at where you want to be, what you want to do. Do you want to go to school? What the cost is going to be for your family to live in that area, and just get prepared and use all the resources that you can. I know the military does a good job at providing the transition class near the end, and that's amazing. But it is also different depending on what you're doing. If you're separating before retirement, it's a little bit different than if you are retiring.
Okay.
So make sure to look into what those differences are, particularly when you're separating, which is what I did after 8 years. You have to consider the skill level that you acquired up to that point. I had quite a bit of leadership experience because I was a leading petty officer when I left the service. So I had leadership experience. But if you're an E4 or below, maybe you don't have as much leadership experience. So consider that. Consider that that employers are going to be looking at that, and just come up with a plan. I think that's my general advice.
Now, you bring up a great point that we haven't talked about, as you said, if you're an E4. So let's talk about that, because I understand the levels based on, but if you could explain for maybe those out there that don't understand what you're talking about when you talk about E4. I think my dad was E9. Don't quote me on that. Okay.
So there are two different branches of rank in the military.
Okay.
Well, some there are three.
Okay.
So you have an enlisted branch, you have a warrant officer branch, and you have a commissioned officer branch. So commissioned officers typically either attend service academies or college, and they commission through the college, or they go to what's called officer candidate school, and they become a commissioned officer, which means they have more charge. They do jobs that require a heavy amount of responsibility and oversight for the enlisted division and warrant officer divisions. Warrant officer is more of the experienced personnel. So they're very specialized. So on an aircraft carrier, a lot of the times the fire marshal is a warrant officer.
Okay.
And it's usually, there's jokes about them being the old crusty warrant officer who no one can tell what to do, even the captain, because they have more experience. They have the most experience in a very niche area.
There you go.
And then you have your enlisted division from E1 to E9, right? And those are when you get to the I would say E5 to E9 ranks, you're in management. Okay. So you're somewhat managing. If you're E7 to E9 in the Navy, you're a chief, and you're in the chief ranks, and they have broad purview over huge programs. So anything E6 and below, you can be a leading petty officer, but chiefs are usually responsible for divisions.
Gotcha. My dad was chief petty officer, Stephen D. George.
Nice.
He was he did supply, and actually in his heyday, I believe we were in Australia, he had 14 warehouses and so many ships underneath him or something ridiculous. And his team still holds the record for the quickest offloading of supplies on a ship in Australia. No one has passed their record yet. And that was made in 82, 81. So, a little pride there. But yeah, it's an interesting to see. Like my father was on a scholarship, gymnastics scholarship, attending college. And he felt the need to serve his country. And so he actually left that scholarship and signed up in the Navy, and then did 2 tours in Vietnam, and then made a career out of it, and absolutely loved it. And my mother came in and just, was like, all right, let's go. pack the bags, journey time, and it
Yeah.
was cool to see. So it gave a perspective that people don't always necessarily get in their life. By the time I was 14, I had traveled more places than most people ever get a chance, but I had lived there, gotten the culture and the side. And I think that's one of the coolest parts of my life that, because it makes me treat people different. I think
Absolutely.
more equal. I think more human.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, the commitment that the family makes is something that is always overlooked. The fact that, it's not just the service member that's deploying, it's the family that serves as well.
Yes.
The sacrifice of moving schools in the middle of the school year because, dad or mom got orders to another base. And the kid, having to create a whole nother a group of friends, and it's very tough on the children and the spouse, especially because when you're there, you're kind of contributing and whatever, and then when you leave, there's this massive void.
Oh, yeah.
And that spouse has to take on all that responsibility, from the child care to the making the expenses and bills happen while you're away. So it's a very tough, and in the reintegration is even tough. You coming back, that person having all of that weight of the household on them, and then you coming back, and then that responsibility having to be shared again.
Oh, yeah.
It's a very tough situation for spouses, and I think that the spouse deserves just as much just as much credit as a service member.
They serve with them. They really do.
They
They
do.
serve by their side. So that's outstanding. I want to thank you so much for coming and chatting with us, Levi. I'm sure we're going to have you back on it as you and I align on a lot of stuff we're trying to do to help the veterans and the military families and themselves. But thank you for your service. Thank you for your continued service and fight. And just thank you for being here with us today. I appreciate you so much for this.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this. This is tremendous. It's great to have veterans' voices amplified, because so often are we forgotten, I feel.
Absolutely. Well, I promise you I will never forget, my friend.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you guys for joining us today. We appreciate it. We're going to have a new episode coming up soon, so you want to make sure that you follow us either on YouTube or Spotify or social media, wherever we are. Like, follow. You got a topic you want us to talk about? Let us know. We'll see you next time. Bye.